The Dominion had ruled the stars for 3,000 years. They had conquered worlds beyond counting. They had crushed empires and absorbed civilizations. Every species they had ever met had either submitted to their power or been erased from existence. This was the natural order of things. They were the masters of the galaxy, and they had never known defeat. High Commander stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominance. He was tall even by standards, with gray skin that shimmered like polished stone and eyes that burned with cold fire. 200 warships followed behind him, their hulls gleaming in the light of distant stars. This was the Outer Rim Patrol Fleet, the iron fist that kept the borders of the Dominion safe from any threat. Not that there were any threats left. The last species to resist that had been destroyed 400 years ago. Since then, the patrols had become routine, boring even. Spent most of his time reviewing reports and attending ceremonies. He missed the old days when there were still enemies to crush. Sub-Commander approached him with quick steps. She was younger than, with sharper features and eyes that never stopped moving. Where was bold and proud was careful and quiet. Some said she worried too much. Found her caution useful, even if he rarely followed her advice. "High Commander," she said, her voice tight, "we have detected something unusual." Turned to face her. Unusual in what way? Gestured to the main display screen. It flickered to life, showing a map of the surrounding space. At the edge of the map, a small red dot blinked steadily. "An unknown vessel," explained. "It appeared on our sensors approximately 20 minutes ago. It is holding position near the border of our territory." Studied the dot with mild interest. "Unknown, that is rare. What do our scans tell us?" "That is the problem, High Commander. Our scans are inconclusive." Pulled up more data on the screen. "The vessel is large, very large, approximately twice the size of our heavy cruisers. It appears to be heavily armored with a hull composition we do not recognize. We are detecting significant heat signatures from within, suggesting powerful reactors. But the vessel itself appears to be dormant. No movement, no active systems. It is simply sitting there." Leaned forward slightly. This was more interesting than he had expected. A derelict, perhaps, some failed civilization's last attempt at exploration. "Possibly," agreed, though her tone suggested doubt. "But there is something else. The design of the vessel is unlike anything in our records. It is not elegant or beautiful. It has no curves, no decorations, no windows. It is all angles and sharp edges. It looks like it was built for only one purpose." "And what purpose is that?" Hesitated before answering. "War." Laughed. The sound echoed across the bridge, causing several officers to look up from their stations. "War? Against whom? If this vessel belongs to some warrior race, they are clearly extinct now. Their ship floats dead in space, a monument to their failure." He waved his hand dismissively. "Send a boarding party. I want to know what technology they have. Perhaps we can salvage something useful." Shifted uncomfortably. "High Commander, I would advise caution. We do not know what we are dealing with. Perhaps we should observe from a distance first, run more detailed scans." "Caution is for the weak," interrupted. "We are the Dominion. We do not fear dead ships and extinct species. Send the boarding party immediately." Bowed her head in submission. She knew better than to argue with when his mind was made up. She turned and gave the orders. Within minutes, a small shuttle detached from one of the cruisers and began its approach toward the unknown vessel. In the shadows of the bridge, an old watched the scene unfold with growing unease. His name was, and he was an elder, one of the ancient historians who kept the records of the Dominion's long history. He had seen many things in his centuries of life. He had read documents that most did not even know existed, and something about this situation stirred memories he had hoped to forget. Moved closer to the display screen, studying the silhouette of the unknown ship. Its brutal design was familiar somehow. He had seen something like it before, in records so old they were nearly forgotten. Records that spoke of a species from a distant arm of the galaxy. a species that had been classified under a special protocol, sealed away and never mentioned again. He tried to remember the details, but they slipped away like water through his fingers. It had been so long ago. Surely it was nothing. Surely this was just coincidence. The boarding shuttle drew closer to the unknown vessel. On the main screen, everyone could see its approach. The shuttle looked tiny compared to the massive hull of the dormant ship. It was like watching an insect crawl toward a sleeping giant. Then the giant woke up. It started slowly. A single light flickered on somewhere deep within the unknown vessel. Then another. Then another. One by one, lights began to appear across the entire hull, spreading like fire across dry wood. Within seconds, the entire ship was glowing with a deep crimson light that pulsed like a heartbeat. The bridge of the Dominance fell silent. Every officer stopped what they were doing and stared at the screen. Even, who had been so confident moments ago, felt something cold settle in his chest. The boarding shuttle had stopped moving. It hung in space, frozen, as if the crew inside had forgotten how to breathe. Then a sound crackled through the communication systems. It was a voice, deep, calm, and completely without fear. It spoke in a language they did not recognize at first. Then the translation systems kicked in and the words became clear. "This is the UNSF Silent Fury. State your intentions." No one on the bridge moved. No one spoke. The words hung in the air like a challenge, like a warning, like the first rumble of thunder before a great storm. Found his voice first. "What is UNSF? What species is this?" His fingers flew across her console, searching for answers. Her face grew paler with each passing second. I do not know, High Commander. There is no record of this designation in our databases, no record of this ship design, no record of this language. She looked up at him with fear in her eyes. "We have never encountered this species before." But Elder knew that was not true. They had encountered this species before. 1,000 years ago, when the Dominion was still young and hungry. They had found a small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. They had observed the creatures living there, primitive, violent, constantly at war with themselves. The Council had decided they were not worth the trouble of conquest. They had placed them under a containment protocol and moved on. The protocol had a name, a simple warning that now remembered with terrible clarity. "Do not engage." Opened his mouth to speak, to warn of what they were facing. But before he could say anything, the crimson ship began to move. Its engines flared with power that made the sensors scream in protest. It turned slowly, deliberately, until its bow was pointing directly at the Dominance. And in that moment, as 200 warships faced a single vessel from an unknown species, High Commander felt something he had never felt before in his long and glorious career. He felt afraid. Captain stood on the bridge of the Silent Fury with her hands clasped behind her back. She was not a tall woman, but there was something about her presence that made her seem larger than she was. Her black hair was pulled back in a tight knot. Her uniform was simple and clean. Her face showed no emotion at all. Around her, the bridge hummed with quiet activity. Officers sat at their stations, monitoring screens and adjusting controls. There was no panic, no urgency. These were professionals who had seen battle many times before. To them, this was just another day. Lieutenant looked up from his weapons console. He was young, perhaps 30 years old, with sharp eyes and quick hands. He had been assigned to the Silent Fury straight out of the academy, and he had proven himself in a dozen engagements since then. "Captain," he said calmly, "I have completed the tactical analysis of the alien fleet." Turned slightly, report. 200 vessels of various sizes. The largest appears to be their flagship, roughly equivalent to our old destroyer-class ships. Their weapons are primarily plasma-based, with some kinetic options. Shield technology is present but primitive. I estimate their defensive systems are approximately 400 years behind our current standards. And their offensive capability. paused to check his numbers. If all 200 ships fired at us simultaneously, they would achieve approximately 12% shield penetration. Our armor would handle the rest without difficulty. Nodded slowly. She had expected as much. The galaxy was full of species who thought themselves powerful simply because they had never met anyone stronger. They were no different. Their ships were impressive for their level of development, but they were children playing with toys compared to the weapons humanity had built. Chief Engineer's voice came through the internal communication system. She was down in the engine room, surrounded by the massive reactors that gave the Silent Fury its power. Captain, all systems are operating at optimal levels. Jump drives are charged and ready. I can give you micro jumps on 3 seconds notice. Understood, replied. Keep the drives hot, we may need them. On the main screen, the alien fleet was arranging itself into a combat formation. It was a classic pattern, the kind of thing any military academy would teach in the first year, had seen it 100 times before. It was effective against enemies of similar technology. Against the Silent Fury, it meant nothing. The communication officer spoke up. Captain, we are receiving a transmission from the alien flagship. Let me hear it. The bridge speakers crackled to life. A deep voice filled the room, speaking in a language of harsh sounds and sharp clicks. The translation software worked quickly, converting the words into something could understand. Unknown vessel, you have entered the territory of the Dominion. You will power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will be met with immediate destruction. You have no hope of survival against our fleet. Surrender now, and you may be allowed to live as servants of the Dominion. The transmission ended. Silence returned to the bridge. Lieutenant actually laughed. It was a short sound, quickly suppressed. They want us to surrender. His expression did not change. They do not know what we are. They see a single ship and assume we are weak. She turned to the communication officer. Open a channel. Channel open, Captain. Spoke clearly and slowly. Fleet, this is Captain of the UNSF Silent Fury. You have 60 seconds to withdraw from this sector. This is your only warning. She made a cutting gesture, and the communication officer closed the channel. On the Dominance, High Commander stared at the screen in disbelief. His face had turned a darker shade of gray, which meant he was angry, very angry. No one had ever spoken to him this way. No species had ever dared to threaten the Dominion. Who does this creature think she is? He snarled. 1 ship against 200, she is mad. Sub-Commander was studying her console with intense focus. The more she learned about the human vessel, the more worried she became. High Commander, I am detecting some very unusual readings from that ship. Their power output is. It should not be possible. A vessel that size should not be able to generate that much energy. Enough, slammed his fist against the arm of his command chair. I do not care about power readings. I care about teaching these arrogant creatures their place. All ships attack formation. Prepare to fire on my command. The fleet began to move. 200 warships spread across the void like the wings of some great predator. Their weapons powered up, filling space with the hum of plasma coils and the click of kinetic rounds being loaded. Elder pushed his way to his side. His old face was pale and his hands were shaking. High Commander, please, I beg you to reconsider. I have remembered something important. Barely glanced at him. Not now, Elder, I am busy. You do not understand. This species, I have seen them before, in the old records, the very old records. They were classified under a special protocol. We were ordered never to engage them, never to provoke them. What protocol? What are you talking about? Grabbed's arm, which was a serious violation of protocol, but the old historian was beyond caring about such things. They are called humans. They come from a world called Earth. 1,000 years ago we found them. We watched them. We saw what they did to each other, the wars, the destruction, the endless violence. Our ancestors decided they were too dangerous to conquer. They sealed the records and hoped the humans would destroy themselves. Shook off the elders' grip. And clearly they did not. So what? They are still just one ship. We are 200. You do not understand, repeated, his voice cracking. The records said they were dangerous because of how fast they advanced. In the time it took us to improve one weapon, they improved 100. In the centuries since we last observed them, they could have. He could not finish the sentence. The possibilities were too terrible to speak aloud. But was not listening. His pride would not let him retreat from a single enemy vessel. The honor of the Dominion was at stake. On the Silent Fury, the countdown had reached 10 seconds. Sergeant Minu stood in the Marine Bay with his team. They were fully armored, ready for boarding actions if needed. But Minu suspected they would not be needed today. He had seen the tactical analysis. This was not going to be a battle. Think they'll actually withdraw? One of his soldiers asked. Minu shook his head. No, they have too much pride. They will attack and then they will learn. Learn what? Minu's face was hard behind his helmet's visor. They will learn what humans do to those who threaten us. The countdown reached 0. On the bridge, Captain's voice was calm and cold. Time is up. Lieutenant, ready the primary weapon. Primary weapon ready, Captain. Looked at the screen one last time. 200 ships, thousands of alien lives. They had been given a chance to survive and they had rejected it. That was their choice. Now they would face the consequences. Fire when ready. The Silent Fury did not roar. It did not shake or tremble. The weapon it carried was beyond such crude physics. There was only a brief pulse of light, visible for just a fraction of a second, and then the first cruiser simply stopped existing. From the bridge of the Dominance, watched in horror as one of his ships folded in on itself. It was there one moment and gone the next, crushed into a point smaller than his fist. The ships around it were caught in the gravitational shockwave. They tumbled and broke apart, their hulls crumpling like paper in a strong wind. In 12 seconds, 24 warships were destroyed. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the attack stopped. The Silent Fury hung motionless in space, its crimson lights pulsing steadily. It waited. The entire fleet had frozen. Not a single ship moved. Not a single weapon fired. Every officer on every bridge was staring at their screens, unable to believe what they had just witnessed. This was the stillness, the moment when predators realized they were prey, the moment when pride shattered against the hard wall of reality. Captain's voice came through the communication channel one more time. It was still calm, still cold, still completely without fear. That was one weapon, we have 47. I will repeat my offer once, withdraw. High Commander sat in his command chair, his hands gripping the armrests so hard his knuckles had turned white. For the first time in his life, he had no idea what to do. The silence on the bridge of the Dominance was absolute. Officers stood frozen at their stations. Display screens flickered with data that no one was reading. The only sound was the quiet hum of the ship's systems and the ragged breathing of terrified crew members. High Commander stared at the space where 24 of his ships had been. There was nothing left. Not debris, not escape pods, not even dust. They had simply ceased to exist. Thousands of soldiers, gone in the time it took to blink. Sub-Commander was the first to find her voice. It came out as a whisper. High Commander, what do we do? Did not answer immediately. His mind was racing, trying to process what he had just witnessed. In his entire career, he had never seen a weapon like that. He had never even imagined a weapon like that. The graviton lance had bent space itself, crushing a ship like a giant crushing an insect. And the human captain had said they had 47 weapons. High Commander pressed, "Your orders." His jaw tightened. He was afraid, yes, but he was also proud. The Dominion had never retreated from a battle, not once in 3,000 years. To flee now from a single ship would be the greatest shame in their history. His name would be spoken with disgust for generations. "No," he said finally. His voice was harder than he felt. "We will not run. We still have 176 ships. We will overwhelm them with numbers." High Commander began. I said no, rose from his chair, his eyes burning with desperate fury. "All ships attack, full weapons fire, destroy that thing." The fleet lurched into motion. 176 warships surged forward, their engines blazing with desperate energy. Plasma cannons charged. Missile bays opened. Kinetic rounds were loaded into magnetic accelerators. Every weapon the had was aimed at the silent fury. On the human ship, Lieutenant watched the approaching fleet with professional interest. "They are attacking, Captain. All ships, full assault." Captain nodded slightly. She had expected this. Pride was a powerful thing. It made people do stupid things even when they knew better. "Chief, activate defensive protocols." Down in the engine room, his fingers danced across her control panel. She was surrounded by holographic displays showing every system on the ship. The jump drives hummed with power, ready to respond at her command. "Defensive protocols active, Captain. The AI is tracking all incoming fire. We are ready for micro-jumps." The fleet opened fire. 200 weapons blazed across the void. Plasma beams cut through space like bright blue knives. Missiles streaked forward on trails of fire. Kinetic rounds, moving at incredible speeds, raced toward their target. The silent fury vanished. For a heartbeat, it simply was not there. The space where it had been was empty. The weapon's fire passed through nothing, traveling uselessly into the void beyond. Then the silent fury reappeared, 100 kilometers to the left of where it had been. His eyes went wide. What, how? The ship vanished again, and reappeared again, and again. It was jumping through space in tiny hops, each lasting less than a second. The weapons could not track it. By the time they adjusted their aim, the target was already somewhere else. "They are using their faster-than-light drives as a defensive system," said, her voice filled with disbelief. "They are making micro-jumps to avoid our fire. That should not be possible. The energy requirements alone would." "I do not care how they are doing it," shouted, "just hit them." But they could not hit them. The silent fury danced through the formation like a ghost. It was there and not there, appearing and disappearing so quickly that the eye could barely follow. The mathematics of the situation were brutal and simple. To hit a target, you needed to know where it would be when your weapon arrived. But the silent fury could move to any point in space instantly. There was no prediction that could account for that. On the bridge of the human ship was monitoring the situation with calm efficiency. "Enemy fire is at 0% effectiveness, Captain. They cannot touch us." Watched the display for a long moment. They were still firing, still trying, still hopping. It was almost sad. They did not understand what they were fighting. They did not understand that the gap between their technology and humanity's was not a difference of degree. It was a difference of kind. "Target their largest vessels," ordered. "Non-lethal damage only. I want them disabled, not destroyed." Raised an eyebrow. "Non-lethal, Captain." "They have made their point. They attacked despite my warning. Now we will make our point." Eyes were cold. "I want them to survive this. I want them to go home and tell their leaders what happened here. Fear is a better weapon than death." "Understood, Captain." The silent fury stopped dancing. It hung still in space for just a moment, as if gathering itself. Then it began to move forward, directly into the heart of the fleet. The aliens kept firing. Every ship unleashed everything it had. The space around the silent fury blazed with light and fire. But the human ship simply absorbed the attacks. Its shields flickered but held. Its armor, made of materials that had never seen, turned away plasma and kinetic rounds alike. Then the secondary weapons activated. These were not the terrible graviton lance. These were smaller weapons, designed for precision work, that fired slugs at a fraction of light speed, pulse lasers that could cut through steel like paper, targeted electromagnetic pulses that fried electronic systems from the inside. The silent fury carved through the fleet like a blade through water. Ships lost power, their lights went dark, their weapons went silent, their engines sputtered and died. One by one, the proud warships of the Dominion became drifting hulks, alive but helpless. In the Marine Bay, Sergeant Menu listened to the battle reports with grim satisfaction. His soldiers sat around him, their weapons ready, but there was nothing for them to do. This was not their fight. This was a demonstration. "How many ships are still active?" one of the Marines asked. Menu checked his display. "About 60. The captain is leaving enough of them functional to retreat." "Why, we could destroy them all." Menu shook his head. "That is not the point. Dead enemies cannot spread fear. Living enemies can. When these survivors return to their leaders and describe what they saw, every species in this dominion will know what happens when you threaten humanity." Back on the Dominance, chaos had taken hold. The flagship was still functional, but barely. Half of its systems were damaged. The lights flickered constantly. Officers shouted conflicting reports over each other. Sat in his command chair like a statue. He could not move. He could not speak. He could only watch as everything he had believed about the Dominion crumbled into dust. Elder stood beside him, his old face wet with tears. "I told you," he whispered. "I told you not to engage them. Our ancestors knew. They knew what humans were. They knew what humans could become." "What are they?" finally asked. His voice was hollow, empty of all pride. "What kind of monsters have we awakened?" Closed his eyes. "They are not monsters, High Commander. That is what makes them so terrifying. They are just people. People who have spent their entire existence learning how to fight, how to survive, how to win." He opened his eyes and looked at the crimson ship that had destroyed his fleet. "We thought we were the masters of the galaxy. We thought we had conquered everything worth conquering. But we were just children, playing in a small corner of the universe, unaware of the wolves that waited in the dark." The silent fury had stopped attacking. It hung motionless among the wreckage of the fleet. Around it, disabled ships drifted helplessly. The few vessels that still had power were retreating as fast as their damaged engines could carry them. Then Captain's voice came through the communication channel one more time. It was not angry. It was not triumphant. It was simply tired, like a teacher explaining something to a slow student. "High Commander, your fleet has been neutralized. 62 of your ships retain partial functionality. The rest will require rescue within the next several hours before their life support fails. I suggest you focus your attention on saving your people rather than continuing this pointless conflict." There was a pause, then she continued. "When you have recovered, I would like to speak with you. There are things you need to understand about humanity, things that will determine whether your species survives the coming years." Another pause. "I will be waiting." The channel closed. The silent fury's engines flared once, and it moved to a position some distance from the debris field. Its lights dimmed slightly, shifting from aggressive crimson to a calmer amber. It was still watching, still waiting. High Commander looked at the shattered remains of his fleet. He looked at the faces of his officers, filled with fear and confusion. He looked at his own hands, which had once held the power of the Dominion, and now held nothing at all. Then he gave an order he had never expected to give. "All ships, stand down, begin rescue operations immediately." He paused, and the next words were the hardest he had ever spoken. "And open a channel to the human vessel. Tell them I will listen." The rescue operations took 12 hours. Shuttles flew back and forth between the damaged ships, pulling survivors from failing life support systems. Medical bays overflowed with wounded soldiers. The sounds of pain and grief filled the corridors of every remaining ship. High Commander did not sleep during those hours. He stood on the bridge of the Dominance and watched the work continue. Every life saved reminded him of how many had been lost. 24 ships destroyed completely, thousands dead, and all because of his pride. Sub-Commander approached him as the last shuttle returned from its rescue mission. Her uniform was stained and her eyes were tired. She had been working alongside the medical teams, doing whatever she could to help. "The rescue operations are complete, High Commander," she reported. "We have recovered all survivors from the disabled vessels. Final casualty count is still being calculated, but preliminary estimates suggest we lost over 8,000 soldiers." Said nothing. The number meant nothing to him now. Numbers were just numbers. The reality was the empty bunks, the silent corridors, the families back home who would never see their loved ones again. "The human ship has not moved," continued. "They have been watching us the entire time. They have made no hostile action since you agreed to talk." "They did not need to," said quietly. "They made their point very clearly." Elder shuffled onto the bridge. He looked even older than before, as if the events of the past day had aged him decades. In his hands, he carried a data tablet covered with ancient symbols. "High Commander," he said, "you asked me what the humans were. I have spent the past several hours searching the oldest archives. I have found the records our ancestors tried to hide." He held out the tablet. "You need to see this." Took the tablet. The screen showed images and text in a language that had not been used for centuries, but the translation was clear enough. "1,000 years ago," explained, "when the Dominion was young, we sent exploration ships to distant parts of the galaxy. One of those ships found a small yellow star with a blue planet orbiting it. That planet was home to a species that called themselves humans." The tablet showed images of that planet. It was beautiful, covered in blue oceans and green continents. But the images also showed something else. Cities burning, armies marching, mushroom clouds rising into the sky. "The humans were primitive by our standards," continued. "They had not even reached their own moon yet, but our observers were not interested in their technology. They were interested in their behavior." Scrolled through more images. Wars, constant wars, every generation fighting the previous one. Nations rising and falling in cycles of violence. Weapons becoming more destructive with each passing decade. "Our ancestors watched the humans for 100 years, said. In that time, the humans advanced more rapidly than any species we had ever encountered. What took the 1,000 years to develop, the humans created in less than 50. "How is that possible?" asked. His face was grim. "Because of their wars, every conflict forced them to innovate. Every enemy taught them new lessons. They did not have the luxury of slow, peaceful development. They had to advance or die." The tablet showed new images now. Ships leaving the blue planet, colonies spreading to nearby worlds, wars between those colonies, each one more devastating than the last. And through it all, the humans kept advancing, kept building, kept fighting. "Our ancestors decided the humans were too dangerous to conquer," said. "Even at their primitive level, they showed a capacity for violence that disturbed our leaders. So they created a special protocol. They sealed the records and ordered that humanity be left alone. They hoped that the humans would eventually destroy themselves, as so many violent species do." Looked up from the tablet, but they did not destroy themselves. "No," agreed. "They came very close several times, but each time they survived. They learned, they adapted." He gestured toward the viewport where the silent fury waited in the distance. "And now, 1,000 years later, they have built that." On the silent fury, Captain was reviewing reports of her own. The battle had gone exactly as she had expected. They were strong by the standards of this region of space, but they had never faced a true challenge. They had grown soft in their dominance. Lieutenant entered her ready room. "Captain, the aliens have completed their rescue operations. Their commander has agreed to meet with you." Good stood and straightened her uniform. "Prepare the shuttle. I will take Sergeant Menu as my escort." Just mean you. Captain, with respect, we do not know if this is a trap. Almost smiled. Almost. If it is a trap, one Marine will be enough. You saw what our weapons did to their fleet. Their personal weapons will not be any more effective. Nodded slowly. He had seen the tactical analysis. Even if every soldier on the flagship attacked, Minyu's powered armor would protect him, and his personal shield generator could withstand anything short of a direct nuclear strike. In the Marine Bay, Minyu was briefing his team on the situation. They had gathered around him, their faces serious behind their helmet visors. "The captain is meeting with the alien commander," he said. "I will be her only escort. The rest of you will remain on standby. If anything goes wrong, you will deploy immediately." "Sir," one of the Marines said, "what are the chances that something goes wrong?" Minyu considered the question. "Lo, the aliens have seen what we can do. They know they cannot win, but desperate people do desperate things. Stay alert." He paused and looked at each of his soldiers in turn. These were good people, trained professionals who had fought beside him in a dozen engagements. They had seen the worst the galaxy had to offer and had never flinched. "I want you to understand something," he continued. "This mission is not about combat. It is about sending a message. The captain wants these aliens to survive. She wants them to spread the word about what happened here. Our job is to be terrifying without being cruel. Understood?" The Marines nodded. They understood. This was what humanity did. They won battles not just with weapons, but with reputation. Every enemy they faced would know what had happened to the enemies before them. Fear was a force multiplier that cost nothing and lasted forever. Back on the Dominance, High Commander was preparing for the meeting. He had changed into his formal uniform, the one reserved for diplomatic occasions. It felt wrong somehow. Diplomacy was supposed to happen between equals. There was nothing equal about this situation. Elder accompanied him to the shuttle bay. "What will you say to her?" Shook his head. "I do not know. What do you say to someone who could destroy everything you have built but chooses not to?" "Perhaps you say thank you." Stopped walking and turned to face the old historian. "Thank you for killing 8,000 of my soldiers." "For not killing all of them," replied. "You heard what the human captain said. She has 47 weapons. She used one. If she had wanted to destroy us completely, we would be dead already, every single one of us." He placed a hand on his arm. "Something stopped her. Something made her show mercy. I think we need to understand what that something is." The shuttle carrying Captain and Sergeant Minyu arrived an hour later. It docked with the Dominance without incident. Guards watched nervously as the airlock opened, and two humans stepped out. His first thought was that they were smaller than he expected. Barely reached his chest, and even Minyu, despite his intimidating armor, was shorter than the average soldier. But there was something in the way they moved that made size irrelevant. They walked like predators, alert and confident. Stopped in front of and studied him for a long moment. Her eyes were dark and unreadable. Then she spoke. "High Commander, I am Captain of the United Nations Space Force. Thank you for agreeing to speak with me." Struggled to find the right response. His diplomatic training seemed useless now. "You destroyed my fleet and killed thousands of my people, and you thank me for agreeing to speak." "I gave you a warning," replied. "You chose not to listen. The deaths of your soldiers are tragic, but they are the result of your choice, not mine." Her words were harsh, but her tone was not cruel. She was simply stating facts, the way a doctor might describe the symptoms of a disease. "Come," said finally, "let us talk somewhere more private. I think we have much to discuss." They walked together through the corridors of the Dominance, human and alien side by side. Every they passed stopped and stared. Some looked afraid, others looked angry, but none of them dared to interfere. Led them to his private conference room. It was a large space, decorated with the trophies of past conquests, weapons taken from defeated enemies, flags from conquered worlds. He noticed glancing at these items and wondered what she thought of them. They sat across from each other at a wide table. Minyu stood behind, motionless as a statue. Elder took a position near the door. So said, "What do you want from us?" Folded her hands on the table. "That depends on what you want from the future." "I do not understand." "Then let me explain," leaned forward slightly. "Humanity has been watching your dominion for quite some time. We know how you treat other species. Conquest, slavery, extinction. You believe you have the right to rule because you are strong." Nodded slowly. "That is the way of things. The strong rule, the weak serve." "Then let me ask you a question, High Commander." Eyes met his. "What happens when someone stronger comes along?" The question hung in the air like a blade, felt its edge against his throat. He finally understood why the human captain had come to talk instead of simply destroying him. This was not mercy. This was a lesson, and the lesson was just beginning. The conference room felt smaller than it had before. High Commander sat in his chair like a prisoner waiting for judgment. Across from him, Captain waited patiently for his response to her question. What happens when someone stronger comes along? Found himself struggling with something he had never experienced before. Doubt. His entire life he had believed in the simple truth of power. The strong ruled, the weak served. It was the natural order, the foundation of civilization. But now a being who could crush him without effort was asking him to imagine a different kind of universe. "If someone stronger came along," he said slowly, "they would have the right to rule us. That is the law we live by." "And how has that law served the species you conquered?" asked. "Did they benefit from your strength?" Opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. He thought about the worlds his fleet had subjugated, the species forced into labor, the cultures erased in the name of unity. He had always told himself it was necessary. Progress required sacrifice. Order required control. But looking at the human woman across from him, he wondered if that was really true. "They served the greater good," he finally said, though the words sounded hollow even to his own ears. Leaned back in her chair. "Let me tell you about humanity, High Commander. Perhaps it will give you a different perspective." She spoke for a long time. She told him about Earth, the cradle world of humanity. She described its history, the wars that had its surface, the empires that had risen and fallen, the weapons that had grown more terrible with each generation. She explained how humans had nearly destroyed themselves not once but many times. Nuclear weapons, climate catastrophe, biological disasters. "Every time we faced extinction," said, "we found a way to survive. Not because we were the strongest but because we refused to give up. That stubbornness is our greatest strength and our greatest weakness." Listened in silence. The story she told was different from anything he had expected. He had assumed humans were simply more advanced, that their technology had given them power without cost. But the truth was far more complicated. "When we finally reached the stars," continued, "we brought all of our flaws with us. The Belt Wars killed millions. The Titan Rebellion almost tore our civilization apart. Even now, after centuries of space travel, we struggle with the same problems we have always had: greed, fear, hatred." "Then how are you different from us?" asked. Was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "Because we remember what it was like to be weak. We remember being afraid of the dark. We remember looking up at the stars and wondering if something out there wanted to destroy us." She stood and walked to the viewport. The debris field stretched across space, a silent memorial to the battle that had occurred. Disabled ships drifted among the wreckage, their crews working desperately to repair the damage. "When we encountered other species," said, "we had a choice. We could have conquered them the way you conquer. We could have built an empire on the backs of those weaker than us. Some of my people wanted exactly that. But you did not." "No, we made a different choice." Turned to face him. We decided that strength should protect, not dominate. We decided that the measure of a civilization is not how it treats its enemies, but how it treats those who cannot fight back. Struggled to understand. This philosophy was so different from everything he had been taught. Why? If you have the power to rule, why would you choose not to? Because we remember, repeated. We remember what it felt like to be helpless. We remember the empires that crushed other humans under their heels. We remember the cost of that cruelty, measured in centuries of blood and suffering. Her eyes met his. We do not wish that on anyone, even you. Elder, who had been listening in silence, stepped forward. Captain, may I ask a question? Nodded. If humanity values protection over domination, why did you come here alone? Why did you send only one ship against our entire fleet? Because I hoped it would be enough. His voice carried a hint of sadness. I hoped that if you saw what we could do, you would choose peace over war. I hoped I would not have to kill anyone. She turned back to the viewport. The Silent Fury is not our most powerful ship. It is not even close. It is a patrol vessel designed for border monitoring and emergency response. The true warships of the United Nations Space Force, the dreadnoughts, the carriers, the planet killers, remain in human space. Felt his blood run cold. How many ships do you have? Enough. Did not elaborate. She did not need to. The implication was clear. If a single patrol vessel could destroy a fleet of 200 warships, then the full might of human military power was beyond imagination. What do you want from us? Asked again. The question was different this time. Before it had been a demand. Now it was almost a plea. Returned to her seat. I want you to go home, High Commander. I want you to tell your leaders what happened here. I want them to understand that the universe is larger and more dangerous than they ever imagined. And then they have a choice. They can continue as they have been, conquering and enslaving, secure in the belief that they are the strongest power in the galaxy. If they do that, humanity will respond. Not with one ship, but with hundreds. Not with warnings, but with force. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. Or they can change. They can release the species they have conquered. They can build alliances instead of empires. They can learn to protect the weak instead of exploiting them. If they do that, they will find humanity to be the most loyal friend they have ever known. Thought about the choice she was offering. It was not really a choice at all. Humanity had made its position clear: change or be destroyed. But there was something in the way spoke that suggested this was not a threat. It was an invitation. Why do you care what we do? He asked. You could simply destroy us and be done with it. Smiled for the first time since they had met. It was a small smile, tired and sad. Because we have been where you are now. We have stood at the crossroads between domination and cooperation. We chose the harder path and it cost us dearly, but it also saved us. She stood again and extended her hand toward him. It was a human gesture realized, a sign of trust. I am offering you the same choice, High Commander, the same chance. What you do with it is up to you. Stared at the offered hand for a long moment. Everything in his training told him to reject it, to hold on to his pride, his traditions, his beliefs. But those beliefs had led him here, to a broken fleet and thousands of dead soldiers. Perhaps it was time for something new. He reached out and took her hand. Her grip was firm but not aggressive, equal to equal. I will deliver your message, he said. I do not know if my leaders will listen. They are proud people. We do not change easily. Pride is not always a weakness, replied. It can also be a source of strength if directed properly. Use your pride to build something worth being proud of. She released his hand and stepped back. Sergeant Minu, who had remained motionless throughout the conversation, finally moved to join her. I must return to my ship, said. There are matters that require my attention, but before I go, there is one more thing you should know. What is that? Humanity does not forget, High Commander. We remember every kindness and every cruelty. We remember the species that helped us when we were weak, and we remember those who tried to destroy us. Today, you attacked us. Tomorrow, you may choose to befriend us." Her eyes were serious. "We will remember both." She walked to the door, then paused and looked back over her shoulder. "Choose wisely." Then she was gone. Stood alone in the conference room for a long time after the humans departed. He watched through the viewport as their shuttle returned to the Silent Fury. He watched as the human ship's engines flared with power. He watched as it turned away from the debris field and accelerated into the distance. Within seconds, it had jumped to faster-than-light speed and vanished. The space where it had been was empty, as if it had never existed at all. But the evidence of its presence remained: the disabled ships, the wreckage, the silence that hung over the fleet like a funeral shroud. Elder appeared at his side. "What will you tell the council?" Took a deep breath. "The truth, all of it, the battle, the weapons, the conversation, everything." "They will not believe you." "Then I will make them believe." His voice was harder now, filled with a new kind of determination. "I will show them the recordings. I will let them see what I saw, and I will tell them what Captain told me." And if they still refuse to listen, turned away from the viewport, then they are fools, and fools do not survive long in a universe where humans exist. He walked toward the door, then stopped. "Elder, I want you to update the archives, the entry for humanity." "What should I write?" Thought about the small woman who had faced him without fear. He thought about the terrible power she commanded and the mercy she had chosen to show. He thought about the choice she had offered and the future that might be possible if his people were wise enough to accept it. "Write one word," he said finally. "Respected." Nodded slowly. It was not enough, of course. One word could not capture everything that had happened here, but it was a beginning, a first step toward something new. Outside, the stars burned cold and bright. The debris field drifted silently, a reminder of what pride had cost and what humility might gain. And somewhere in the darkness, humanity waited, patient, powerful, and ready for whatever came next. The stillness after the storm was not empty. It was full of possibilities, full of choices, full of futures that had not yet been written. High Commander walked toward his bridge, ready to begin the long journey home. He did not know what would happen next. He did not know if his people would listen or change or survive. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty: the universe would never be the same again.